Hello, friends. Are you ready to hear the rest of the tale? Then let us commence. Well met and welcome. We catch up with our Ragtags at sunrise on their second morning in the frigid land of Coldmire. Oh, don't mind them. They're having a bit of a sad this morning. If you remember, Coldmire is part of a larger Feywild demiplane known as Meenko. And Meenko is ruled by an elusive archfey named the Lord Shade Valrillin. And, Valrillin has opened up a big old rift between Meenko and Sylvania, just looking to, it's actually not crystal clear what he's up to with all that, but hey, come on. If you need to open up an interdimensional rift to get something done, that something can't be anything good, right? And then there's Meenko. He's found himself in a bit of a pickle, hasn't he? Why don't we start with him? After the hero's desperate battle with the wraiths and other assorted undead from the previous night, Varys was almost killed, and after the battle he realized that Meenko was no longer in his head, or well, anywhere it seemed. It was an urgent concern for the companions, especially Braze, but urgent concerns seemed to be all they were collecting while in Coldmire, so there was nothing to do about it, except crack on and hope they would run into the monk somewhere down the road. Where was Meenko, you ask? I did say we would start with him, didn't I? So Meenko found himself not in Varys's head, not in Brace's head, not in anyone's head, actually. The steadfast monk found himself in a strange, smoggy, ruined Fey city that just happened to be under that giant, ominous, terrifying, arcane rift in the sky. Like, right under it. As we mentioned last time, you never want to see any sort of giant rift in the sky, arcane or otherwise. That said, there wasn't all that much our monk friend could do about the giant hole in the sky that someone was sucking all the magic out of, at least not at the moment. Best he could do, for now, was to keep on keeping on. Making his way outside as stealthily as possible, Meenko climbed up to a rooftop to get a better look at his surroundings. With this better vantage point, Meenko could take in the city, such as it was, around him. Struggling to see clearly through the smog, he could see that the ruined buildings were definitely Fey in design. Whatever kind of downfall or apocalypse had occurred here had happened some time ago. Or, at least, it appeared that way. Time was a funny thing in the Feywild. Oh, or is it, time is a funny thing in the Feywild? Huh, I think that kind of proves the point. Anyway, the whole place had a smoggy, broken, haunted carnival sort of feel to it that Meenko wasn't all that keen on. Just then, in the haze on the street below, he could hear the unmistakable sound of armored feet marching. Staying as hidden as he could on the roof, he scanned and squinted, hoping to make out whoever, or whatever, was approaching. Coming through the smog, a troop of 12 mithril armored Fey soldiers moved in creepy unison and regimented precision. Meenko watched them march by, on a routine patrol of some kind if he had to guess. Just then, a small, tattered and timid Fey creature bolted from out of a pile of rubble, no doubt terrified by the imposing soldiers stomping through the streets. Alerted to the sounds, the armored guards wheeled around, their helmets opening with arcane articulated precision, revealing terrifying red targeting beams that zeroed in on the tiny Fey. In a unified action, the entire squad used their halberds to murder the creature. One of the soldiers scooped up the perforated remains and put it in a strange bag, and with that, they continued on their way, marching into the smog. Meenko didn't have much in the way of time to process what had happened, when he suddenly heard a voice behind him say, "I can see you." Meanwhile, a bit of a ways away in Coldmire, the rest of the companions were collecting themselves as the sun was coming up. Many of them hadn't been able to fully rest and recover thanks to the surprise wraith attack, so, despite the urgency of, everything that was going on, they decided that getting a full rest was probably for the best, resolving to make a later start in the early afternoon and carrying on until nightfall. During his usual meditative trance, Varys found himself dreaming. Or that's what he thought it was at first. In the dream, Varys was strapped to a table with a cloth of some kind over his face. Okay, that is not a good start, is it? Unable to move, Varys tried to get a bearing on his surroundings from the ambient sounds around him. Based on the echoes of everything, the space around him was cavernous and huge. There was a low rumble of something as well, or several somethings. And just above it all was breathing, through a mask of some kind. Breathing and humming. A creepy, creepy humming. At one point, he heard a high-pitched whine as if from some kind of machinery. Then something heavy thudded into a container of some kind by the sound of it. Then the humming again. Always that blasted humming. Then he heard something heavy being wheeled, moving closer. And the humming with it. A hand grabbed his head and turned it forcefully to the side, the cloth falling from his face. Bright light, sterile, white light blinded him for a moment as he felt the grip tighten around him. Then he could see. Just beside the table he was strapped to, a surgical steel cart had been wheeled, and in that cart, numbering close to 20 at least, were perfectly and precisely severed heads, all exact duplicates of his own. That was when the sound of the surgical saw swelled in his ears, and he felt the cold steel touch the skin of his neck. With this sigil, the waking world might offer a warm comfort to the traumatized cleric. But a sparse campsite in the icy wastes of Coldmire was the exact opposite of warm comfort. In the cold hours of early morning, Varys shared what he saw in his dream with Regal. The usually stoic haunted suit of armor answered that his own dreams were filled exclusively with blood and ruin, so maybe the Eladrin shouldn't think too much of it. I'm assuming, probably accurately, that Varys didn't find much comfort in that, but there wasn't much to be done except break camp in the early afternoon and set off further into Coldmire. Before heading out, Varys sent a message to Meenko, wherever he was, seeing if he was alive, trying to find where he was, seeing if he was okay, all of that. And, after a pause, Meenko answered. The monk explained that he was somewhere closer to the rift in the heavens, and that he was safe, for now, and that it wasn't cold where he was. Inspired by that somewhat good news, the heroes and friends moved off into the ice and snow, relieved that they were headed toward their friend, and hopeful that they would eventually be reunited somewhere down the road. As a pleasant surprise, the weather held out again on their second day. Oh, it was still frigid and punishing, and it still snowed. But it was gentle flurries with no blizzard or sleet storm in sight. And, for most of the day, the land was happily free of any sort of dangers, living or otherwise. I mean, at one point there was the sound of giant footsteps trudging through the snow relatively nearby. But thankfully, they ended up stomping off in another direction away from the companions. Now, I did say most of the day. Right? So, about that, as night approached, the companions decided to make up a little bit of lost time from their late start. Scouting ahead, Unia saw something, or someone, in the distance on the path, but a moment later they were gone. She alerted everyone to stay prepared and continued on. Soon enough the figure appeared again. Standing in the middle of the road, such as it was a rider on an impressive steed. Upon closer inspection, the rider was wearing a silver-blue suit of heavy Fey plate armor, and there seemed to be cold emanating from them. That went for the horse as well, a blue-tinted mount that also seemed to embody the icy nature of the land. Occasionally, strange blue blurs could be seen darting around the steed's hooves. As everyone prepared for the worst, the rider, the horse, and the blurs all disappeared in a burst of icy mist. Knowing that a battle was imminent, Varys commanded the warrior, "In the name of Gwynwyn, I demand that you stand down." That Varys, always paying attention, gods bless him. As a reminder, the Ragtags had learned that Gwynwyn was one of the original rulers of this demiplane, so, it was definitely worth a shot to invoke her name here. That all being said, it didn't work, at least not in any way useful in the moment. As most of the companions scattered, Varys and Regal stayed where they were, when the armored Fey Rider, the blue blurs, and the horse materialized 20 feet above them and landed a moment later in the midst of the two heroes. Before anyone could act, the rider attacked Regal with several sword slashes and also their frigid grip, which caused massive damage. Spinning to address Varys, the rider responded in Sylvan, "That name holds no power here," to the cleric's invocation of Gwyn Wyn. Then all three of the blue blurs, which turned out to be icy quicklings, attacked the Eladrin, stabbing him many times until he dropped to the snow unconscious and badly hurt. As the rest of the heroes struck back, most notably the pixies managing to knock out two of the quicklings, the rider felled Regal with an onslaught of sword strikes and cold attacks. Just after Drogon killed the last standing quickling, the rider, the horse, and the two unconscious not dead quicklings all disappeared as fast as they had arrived. As things settled and the wounded were tended to, it was increasingly clear. Whoever this rider was, they were a mortal threat to be sure. It was also apparent that the Fey creature had been toying with the Ragtags, leaving after easily felling two of their number. How long the enemy would be content with merely toying with them remained to be seen. And just who was this dangerous Fey Ice Lord? Whatever secrets and tales there were to learn on that subject lay lost in the frigid ice and snow of Coldmire. For now. In the dying light, the harried heroes settled in for what was most definitely going to be a long, cold night. Meanwhile, or well, earlier, on a rooftop in the smoggy, ruined, post-apocalyptic Fey City, somewhere just under the huge arcane rift in the sky, Meenko wheeled around on whoever had said they had seen him. Standing there, now apologetic for surprising the nerve-racked monk, was a gnomish-like Fey who introduced himself as Banderman Bordel's bot. After assuring Meenko that he was most definitely a friend, Banderman explained a great many things in a very short span of time. For one, he informed Meenko that the two of them, and others nearby, were not actually fully present in Mocha Hain, and as a result, they were invisible to beings that were fully present, like those passing soldiers, for instance. Banderman also explained that the current political system in the Hain was dicey at best, and that they needed to move to a safer location immediately, or run the risk of ending up like that Fey creature that the guards had turned into a pincushion. Encouraging Meenko to leave with him and seek a safer place to discuss the full story of just what was going on, Banderman led them off the roof and into the streets. Moving as stealthily as possible through the smoggy ruins, the duo managed to get some distance from Meenko's initial arrival point. Suddenly, Banderman had them stop their advance and immediately hide in what was once a shattered store. Meenko looked to the hazy skies as the Gnomi Fey or Fey gnome indicated something pushing through the heavy clouds of filth and ash. Three large and ominous silver and smooth ovoid, things descended from above, seemingly headed for the neighborhood where Banderman and Meenko were hiding. Banderman confirmed that A, this was bad, and, more importantly, B, these flying silver weirdos were able to see them, even though they were technically invisible. So, yes, as mentioned before, bad, and definitely not good. The strange flying ovoids slowed and hovered over the ground, and then strange filaments of silver appeared from out of the bottom of their Fey steel carapace, twisting and solidifying into 8 thin, spidery legs. Also, a circle traced itself in what I'm guessing is the front of these strange creatures or machines, and spun on a hinge revealing a red eye that released a beam that began scanning the streets and buildings. Banderman explained that they were going to have to sneak by these sentries to get where they needed to go, and yup, it wasn't going to be easy. It never is, my friends, it never is. Dear me, dear me.